Guys, what's up? How are you doing? It is, what is it? 6:30 p.m. on the 13th of January 2020. Um, Today I'm going to take a look at the fourth release of the fourth podcast from Adam Massey's Growth Swag. And just off the top of my head, I got to tell you that the honesty and transparency of someone like Adam, his industry experience, where he's come from, seeing the honesty and transparency, just sharing uh, his journey from years of working at Google, his prior startup experience, leadership, um, just really sharing a lot of himself. And then now going into his fourth podcast, which is going to talk about a health event he had that was really scary. I would imagine, not I haven't yet heard it, but I could only imagine. So it's about he had a heart attack, and that touches me personally because my own mother had a heart attack a little ways back, and she's fine. But the journey to coming back from that, it's just, you know, it's something I haven't yet experienced, as if I'm going to. But there's been times where my lifestyle and my stress levels were so high that I felt stresses in my chest and in my own arm, and had been worried that the things I was doing were damaging my heart. And I thought about my health, and I made some changes in nutrition and the way I handled stress. So again, my hat is, well, it's on to keep my head warm, but my hat is off to Adam and his ability to share some raw things about both his professional career and also the personal or health, uh, you know, things that he's faced. So, anyways, that's a long intro. I'm live. I really need to get better at sort of just getting down to the meat of it. But I did just kind of want to preamble and say that the Growth Swag podcast is cool. And hopefully Adam does watch these outtakes where I'm like, hey, I'm going to review the Growth Swag. This time I'm going to do it live. I'm going to listen to it live. I'll pause it. I'll take some notes. Maybe I'll do some Googling and make some comments. And I hope to take from this whatever wisdom and pearls that he has to share with all of us. I am a researcher at heart. This many years on the computer, you learn to use it to sort of corroborate or instill deeper thoughts or to give a visual or more words towards whatever topics come to play. So this is going to be new to me. Normally, I listen to his podcast, I take some notes. Before I get into that, I'm going to say that to the actual podcast four, I'm going to do a quick rundown about one through three, and I am sharing my desktop here. So let's see if I can not mess this up. They always get their ad in here. So sorry for that. Um, Look, here it is, guys. Number one, first podcast and thoughts on servant leadership. So I took some notes on that, and again, I was impressed to see the transparency and the bravery that it takes to come out into the public eye and say, here's what I think, and here's what I experienced. And these were the weak points that I had, but I rose above them, or areas where I could strengthen and grow. And so just, the Growth Swag podcast, Adam, if you happen to see this review, is great. Some people who are friends of mine in my life saw me go live and do the review, and then they went ahead and followed your podcast and messaged me today and said, "Hey, I was, watching Adam's podcast on Growth Swag about his heart attack." And I read the comments on LinkedIn today too, and you could tell it resonated with some people. So wow, keep it up, man. I mean, in this day and age, we have platforms to share things that we're really facing beyond, uh, the closed environments of the past. There's a lot we can share with people and help them. So I'm excited to get down to it. In his first podcast and thoughts on servant leadership, excuse me, um, just the highlight was serving your team before anyone else. I have a past video where I kind of go through it in greater depth, maybe share some of my own experiences, but I just want to re-review. Another one was I wanted to ask him what made him want to start his podcast, but I'll talk to him about that at some point. But that was on my question list here. And then here he says a leader exists to serve the people. Those types of bold statements mean a lot to me because they really help do shape feelings that you have innately. And then when you hear someone in his experience and with his experience and his background say things like that, these are ideals that we can live up to. These are ideals that we can follow and that we like to hear. I mean, I like to hear things like the leader exists to serve the people. And at times in projects for me, when we're hands on and we need to deliver things, people get tired, people get burnt out, people get nervous. Hey, I've been there. And a leader will rise up in those moments when we're all moving the ball forward and be the one who makes the right decision and when because they're in the right frame of mind and they can lead in those moments, whether it be for the entire gamut of the project or in moments when you need that specialist to slam dunk it or to take the ball into the end zone. So there's been plenty of times where I've seen the quiet persons on the team become the leader at the key moments. So that's just something that I wanted to bring up there, and just so that was from his first podcast, and then a couple other items, latitude with certain scope. What he was saying was is he's it's important to give the scope to someone and say, look, within these parameters, you can run with this. I trust you, and I give you the latitude to be the leader in this area. Go for it. And I think empowering and enabling your team members is a key ingredient in seeing very uh, skilled people that have been hired to do things or who can even grow out of their box, if you will, do their best work. So I liked seeing that, and it was in the first one. And then, sharing with them what is the strategy. Why are we doing all this busy work up front, or why are we going to do this for a long period of time, and what is it going to be down the road? A certain amount of transparency will make people work on things that they may not like to go to the 11th hour on, but they'll do it if they understand the big picture, right? So that was that. And then we should push your audio to YouTube. That was a comment I had made to him. But I've gone back and forth on that. There's something about the podcast that I think are just so pure that you really have to listen to the words too and embody them. So I think podcasts are great. I think that there's also great communication when you wave your hands or you can showcase corroborating screens or do diagrams. Maybe I get a little lost on some of the business guys out there who use diagramming while they're talking and whatnot. So we'll move along to his second podcast. Again, just a review, a re-review. Always do what's best for the customer. So in his role, in his leadership role, I could see where he was coming from, and I completely agree. We all know that the customer's always right, as they say, is one of the cliches. But I think if you can embody the vision of what you're building, be clear along the way, learn to read their minds through empathy about what they're trying to build and what they want done, and show them that you're capable of producing that. And then you'll see them continue to create. So always do what is right for the customer. And I think that sometimes customers don't know what's best for them either. You got to make the right decisions that will benefit them the best. So I guess I'm hitting on that point a lot because it's a complex point made in a podcast too. It's not just one short sentence. There's a lot to like what will be the best for the customer. And so number two, I noted organizational values. He wrote scalable execution. And when he got into organizational values, he shared some very interpersonal beliefs, and his were love, courage, optimism, and growth. And I've been told before that I'm optimistic. Enthusiastic is another word that at times has been used for me. And I think that you need that. When you're in technology and you have a lot of stress, there's a lot of moving parts, the last thing you need is someone who's grumpy. You've got to be enthusiastic about the work you're doing. You got to be optimistic. You got to have the we can make it happen mentality. So I completely agree with his. And well, first he listed love. Now, for me, that kind of blew me away because the bravery that it would take to say that the four pillars of organizational values would be love, courage, optimism, and growth. I just thought, wow, I never would have personally said love, but it's true. They're your team members. You work with them a lot. They're your clients. They're the work you do, the output, the result. Why are you in your career? It's to do your best work if you can and do it because you can. So I understand now what he means, at least to me, what love could be. Like you bring love to the table. You love your work. You love the team. There'll be challenges. You love serving the customers. So yeah, I get that, and I have revisited this bullet point a couple times. So I came up with my own because I couldn't just borrow his and say I say the same. But I didn't put in the homework on it because I just really wanted to go with what I immediately thought off the top of my head, and mine was honesty, trust, perseverance, and quality. And I can't say it enough about perseverance. I've built a lot of systems that aged and continued to get maintained by the original architects and were iterated on. They weren't thrown to a bunch of different teams over and over like a beach ball, but rather owned and cared for and evolved. And that took perseverance and that took a lot of persistence. So I kind of lumped those into one. But going back to honesty, I mean, you got to be honest with yourself. A lot of times you're going to be pretty optimistic about your estimates or pretty optimistic about your ability to win at this next project the way you see it. And it really gets down to brass tacks when you got to be honest with yourself about a lot of things and be honest with your team members, be honest with about your strengths. Um, don't hold all your cards and don't play poker with projects. Like share with your team and be honest and authentic and spend a lot of time talking to the folks that are integral to the success. And I've noticed when I've been honest and authentic, which I guess I'm grouping things into two-word sections there, I've had the best outcomes. I've become a very important person to teams, not because I demanded it or had a title. In fact, I start off in teams usually without any kind of real important title by choice, and then I work my way through earning trust, which is my second one there, from every single person on the team, because at an intermediate level, I've probably done their job to some degree or can understand it. I've made sure to learn their language to a degree and also have empathy. And I really wish I could put that one here. So mine are here are currently honesty, trust, perseverance, and quality. And you can only have four, according to an exercise he had done in podcast two. So I'll stick with those for now, but I kind of mentioned a couple others. But I mean, and then quality. I mean, so much money gets thrown into building stuff, and why, like, just for the sake of rushing or meeting dates that are frankly made up, why spend so much money and time to not also continually go back and just refine and when I say go back, I mean like immediately go back. Like you think it's done and you want to go off to lunch. Well, yeah, we want to go to lunch, but come back from lunch and refinish that thing with quality. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten to the end of system builds and I know when something is at a pro level or not, and there's no reason to just push it down the line and not finish it with quality, especially with all the investments. So I don't know. Quality needs to be brought up, not just talked about. So honesty, trust, perseverance, quality, you're going to end up with a good team and a good outcome on whatever you're building. So I like that about podcasts too, because it kind of drew that out of me and got to me thinking about some of my past projects and some of the smaller and larger teams and my successes and other projects where I wish that things could have gone differently. But as I've aged and gotten more experience, I've learned communication is key, focus, dedication, just all those words, they matter, right? So that's it. I'll close out on the on podcast two. And then podcast three was understanding perspectives. He brought up empathy, transparency again, active listening. Now, I don't know about you, but it's something that I've learned to do by trying to understand and empathize with the people in their role and their duty. Can't tell you how many times people don't want to go fast. Managers will say, "Hey, we got to go, we got to get fast, we got to get this done." But a technician in a particular role on the team will feel threatened or worried that they're not going to do quality or that they're not doing their best work. So you've really got to decipher each person's words and make the meaning, understand the meaning from where their perspective is, and also empathize and listen. And so active listening is something that I've done. It's something that I could always strengthen. And I like that he mentioned that. He talks about yoga. I'm a pretty stiff guy sometimes, so I'm not sure I'm a big yoga guy, but I do like sports and I do athletic type things. But when it comes to like meditation, which you also brought up, I've done quite a bit of affirmations. And so it's like if I'm feeling stressed, I listen to affirmations that like calm me. And it's like things will get done. You will make it happen. You have everything you need. Like they're just calming words that are just like give you that coaching that you need. So I'm a big fan of affirmations, clearly. Paraphrase, emotion, or context. Um, just a noted there, authenticity and transparency yet again. So podcast three, I think I just kind of, maybe I should have noted more out of that one. It's titled Leading with Empathy, and that's where he talks with how he met someone who he's worked with and been a friend for a long time. And Maria, I think it's Eames, um, really had some perspective on how to be a better manager and have that authenticity and of course transparency with the team. And she had a lot of good points, and so did Adam. So podcast three was great. And so with no further ado, I'm going to basically turn on podcast four and encode it, and then I'll take some notes here. So I'll probably pause it and maybe do some Googling to corroborate or look up things or just do some active listening, hopefully. So let me find a blank sheet here. I've just been noting every project or thing I'm working on nowadays in my notebook. And yeah, so let's start that. So with no further ado, um, we're going to listen to number four, my oh shit moment, having a major heart attack at 40. I mean, Adam, what a title. That's like, wow, scary, you know? So let's get into it. Here we go. And we play.
Growth in the professional setting, but just overall of the GrowthSwag Podcast. I'm Adam Massey.
Let me try to turn that up here. And I'll try to mute my mic.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 1 of the GrowthSwag Podcast. I'm Adam Massey. And today I'm going to be taking you through my first podcast ever. Hopefully the first of many I plan to start doing, with a focus really on leadership and really exploring growth, right? Not only personal growth and growth in the professional setting, but just overall exploring personal and leadership growth, spiritual growth, maybe a little bit through learning, community, and innovation. So a little bit about me. I am father of 3, happily married, been working for probably around 20 years, a little more than 20 years now, and always in technology. Various different software and technology companies. I've done big companies like Oracle and Google. I've done small startups you probably haven't heard of. And when I look back at my career journey, growth is obviously one of the things that you think about when you kind of string together your.
Okay, it appears that I pressed play on the first podcast, which was cool. He has a good background, so maybe that's good for the encoding here to give him some background. But I'm going to go ahead and go back and press play on number 4. So I made that little hiccup there. So let's go ahead and cue down my volume, and let's cue up podcast.
I'm Adam Massey, and this is GrowthSwag. Welcome to episode 4 of GrowthSwag. For everyone who's been listening so far, thank you so much. You guys have all given me great feedback, some awesome inspiration and ideas on topics to cover. I'll try to keep them coming. I will say that I have let my weekly cadence go a little bit. We had the holidays occur. I got sick. You might be able to hear it in my voice, but
I'm back. I'm really trying to do this on a weekly basis. So if you guys have ideas for things you'd like me to talk about, hit me up. I would love to maybe have you on or address the topics that are top of mind for you.
So I'm gonna jump right in and just give some ideas. Again, I don't know. I don't think Adam is gonna. He's a busy man. I don't know if he's gonna listen to my whole audio or video cast about his podcast, but ideas. I mean, with someone with his experience in building technology at Google, and I guess really the team dynamics piece. I mean, really, you can't delve into that enough about how you empowered people, helped them through tough times like a coach, shouldered with them issues that they face in the work environment. I mean, working in technology and working with computers and working with abstract things can sometimes be challenging and rigorous, and especially deadlines and lots of other competing things. So I think that his core values, Adam, I think that your core values that you shared are inspirational. And then I think that to some degree, if you could share, um, illuminate some like sort of back and forth where like Team X and Team Y. I don't know how much you can really share in detail, but I mean situations where there was high stress and a deliverable and how you approached it and like could talk to the different stakeholders and basically negotiate. I mean, that's a skill that every leader needs is negotiation, ways to build bridges and inroads, and even sometimes on the other side to know when a project needs to be cut or something changes that people don't want to have happen. I mean, there's just, I don't know. I don't know what tips I'm giving you other than I'm saying that that interpersonal skill at being a leader is something that I just could just hear hours and hours of just give some background, and even if you repeat yourself a little. But I'll make some notes and I'll stop babbling here, and let's get the cast going again.
So for today, I really want to pivot a bit. So in the past couple sessions, we've talked about leadership primarily, right? So we've spoken about servant leadership. We've talked about developing and leveraging your core values. We've talked about leading with empathy. All these have been topics around leadership, leading people, career, things like that. Today, I actually want to talk about personal growth and my oh shit moment. So in the last couple podcasts, I have alluded to a health event that occurred at some point. And so today I want to delve into that, and I want to get, fairly personal and share my personal story over the last couple of years, what happened, and how it has honestly shaped and changed the direction of my life. So the title of this is my oh shit moment. Um, basically about the fact that I had a heart attack at 40. And so I thought what I would do is maybe just kind of start with a story. But what I would like to do is, make this into sort of a multi-part series. So today I'm going to tell you the story about what happened and how it's dramatically influenced a few different areas of my life. Um, and then what I'd like to do is do some follow-up podcasts, maybe with a couple guests if I can find some people who, are great contributors to these topics, but talk about how the heart attack, I think, was a wake up call for me on a lot of levels, but really how in the wake of that event, I have become, much, much stronger, I think, healthier, more grounded, more mindful. And overall, there's just when a near death experience happens, it really forces you to ground and really think about how do you maximize every moment on this earth. So topics like nutrition and fitness, how have I changed things in that domain since the heart attack? Mindfulness has become a big part of my life. It wasn't prior to. So we'll talk about that and why. Growth, we've spoken about that at length, especially on, it's the name of the podcast, but it's also like a really one of my core personal values. It's a big thing, but that awareness of growth being such a core thing was born from that near death experience. And then finally, connection and how critical that is. So, first of all, let me just tell the story. So, the day was May 19th, 2017. It was a Friday. It was a couple things about that day. I was working from home that Friday. And I remember that just my calendar that day was insane. I had like these 30-minute back-to-back video meetings all day long. And I'm sure we've all been there, but when you have a day like that, it's exhausting because you're just context changing every 30 minutes. It's very, very fast paced. You barely have a chance to go to the bathroom in between meetings. It can be really intense. So I remember kind of coming out of that around 3:30 or 4 p.m. and my calendar was open for the rest of the day. So I texted a good friend and I said, "Hey, let's go riding." And I was uh, rediscovering mountain biking at that time. I'm an avid mountain biker, but at that point, I was really starting to get into it. And so I was like, "Hey, Friday afternoon, let's go for a ride on the trails here in our area." So we decided to do that. I remember kind of racing out, getting my bike gear together, and heading out. And as we started the ride, um, I live in the East Bay of Northern California. It's pretty mountainous terrain here. So every ride starts usually with a ass kicking climb up a mountain, and this one was no different. But I remember it being really hard. We were also having a heat wave at that point, and as we started climbing up the mountain, I remember distinctly thinking like, oh man, like it's super hot out, and I haven't had that much water today. And then I kind of realized, well, I don't even think I've really eaten anything substantial today because I had all those 30-minute meetings. And third sort of realization was, gosh, I hope I brought enough water because it's hot and this climb is really hard. But it was a climb I had done many, many, many times before that. So I was like, I got this. I'm just going to push through it. About halfway up, I remember distinctly feeling a tightness in my chest. And it wasn't a pain, but it was significant enough where it like registered in my brain. I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? It wasn't scary or, oh, that hurts, but more like, oh, that's interesting. Not a feeling I'm used to having. I'll register that. The next several minutes are kind of a blur, but we got to the top of the climb, and I remember saying, like, something feels off. So we decided to come down. And descending on a mountain bike is one of my favorite things in the world. So we hit that pretty hard. And when we got to the bottom, I remember just getting off my bike and having to lay on the ground. I was overwhelmed with nausea. And I just honestly didn't know what was going on. And my friend and I were starting to think like the last thing, the heart attack never really crossed my mind. It may have subliminally, but for the most part, I was thinking heat stroke, or maybe I didn't get enough food today, or I'm dehydrated. Like all these things were going through my mind, but it was just a really strange feeling. Now, at the time, those were the things that I was assuming was wrong. When I compile all the different things I was feeling and tell you now, you're going to be like, hey, you idiot, you were having a heart attack. But I just, that wasn't even something that was registered in my brain because at 40, you still think you're invincible. You still think you're a kid. And this was definitely a pivotal moment in my life where I realized life is finite and bad shit can happen. So, long story short, I was feeling terrible. I was laying on the ground, um, trying to hydrate a little bit. I got a ride home, and immediately took a shower, trying to cool down, tried to eat a banana to see if calories were what I needed, and nothing was sort of helping. It was coming in waves of nausea. My arms felt weird. My fingertips were tingling and a little bit cold. I know, I'm an idiot. I was having a heart attack, but I didn't realize it. So eventually I called 911 and a huge fire truck comes to our house, the whole deal. And they do like a mobile EKG. And at this point, I was a little worried maybe I was having a heart attack. So I was kind of looking for them to confirm it one way or the other. And God bless these first responders. They're amazing. They did like a field EKG. They did all these tests. But these guys looked at me and were like, hey, your vitals look good, but we still think you should get in that ambulance and go to the hospital just in case. Backstory, my wife was actually out of town on one of her first girl trips in a while, and I did not want to like make her come home based on a false alarm. So I declined, and I had to sign legal paperwork, right, in case I died, I guess, so they wouldn't be liable for that. Um, I actually took my kids and our German au pair who was living with us at that time. I got them some takeout food. While we were waiting for the food to be ready, this might be divine, popped in my head, and I remembered like, hey, I feel like I've heard that if you are having a heart attack, aspirin is a good thing to take. And I literally don't even know where that came from. I'd probably heard it somewhere, but for some reason that popped into my head, and I walked across the street to Rite Aid, and I got some aspirin, and I took it right there. So we get my kids their dinner. I've taken aspirin at this point. I go home and I immediately head to the emergency room, and I'm expecting my emergency room experiences up to this point usually were for some minor injury where you sit in the waiting room forever, and I just didn't know what I was going to be in for. I drove myself there. Again, remember, I'm an idiot. Um, and then as I couldn't find parking in front of the emergency room, so idiot drives around to the back into the parking garage, and it's heat wave still. And I end up walking all the way around. And as I'm walking, I remember thinking, Adam, you're an idiot. Like, this is super hot. And this is like hard. It's kind of hard, like a long walk in the heat. You're carrying this backpack. And I started feeling pretty messed up on that walk. And I'm like, man, why did I just park my car right in front and just leave it there? But so I get into the front desk and I go, you say the words, I think I'm having a heart attack. And it's amazing how the gates of the emergency room open for you and you get expedited super quickly into amazing care. So, saw a doctor. They started running tests. They were asking me all kinds of questions. Ultimately, I noticed at one point the tempo in the set of doctors and nurses I was talking to upticked significantly, and the sense of urgency upticked. And I wasn't at that point. In retrospect, I noticed it at the time. I noticed it, but it didn't register. And all of a sudden, they mentioned that I was going to the cath lab. I asked, what is a cath lab? And that's where they put a catheter in. And I was thinking about a catheter, to help you relieve yourself, which is the only kind of catheter I've ever had in a hospital. And when they bring me into this room, it looks like an operating room. And all of a sudden, I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And a new doctor who I hadn't seen before came up to me and said, hey, Adam, how's it going? You're having a heart attack, so we're going to put a stent in right now and clear this up. And that was the first point I was told formally that I was having a heart attack. Super scary experience. But these guys were amazing. And they actually put this catheter in up through a very, very tiny hole in my wrist. Literally left a tiny dot of a scab that healed within a few weeks. And through that little hole in my wrist, they went up into my heart, cleared the blockage, and put a single stent in. What I found out later was my LAD, lower left anterior descending, which is also known as the widowmaker, had become 100% blocked. And it wasn't like I had gone from 70 to 80 to 90 to 100%. Apparently, a very common condition is to have what they call loose vulnerable plaque. It's like a soft plaque that starts to build up way before it starts to calcify and harden when you're much older. But that stuff occasionally ruptures, and when it ruptures, your white blood cells rush to it, and it basically, basically clots and blocks your heart. And what I found out later was that's actually one of the most common causes of death from heart attack, and probably the most common cause of heart attacks for men, especially between 40 and 50 years old. That's sort of a sweet spot for that. Another quick stat while we're talking stats are the LAD, that widowmaker blockage. You have a 20% survival rate from that. So that's another thing that to this day I'm a little overcome when I think about that. I had a 1 in 5 chance of surviving that, and I did. Just insanely grateful, and I can't even put it into words really. So, and just to bring it full circle, if I hadn't taken that aspirin, I was told that I probably would have dropped dead, because with 100% blockage in the LAD, there would have been no way for the blood to flow had it not been thinned out, which is absolutely crazy. That all happened. They put the stent in. I was in the ICU for 4 days. I didn't realize it at the time, but the first night in the ICU was pretty touch and go, actually. My heart was doing some really funky stuff in the wake of that trauma, and they were worried about cardiac arrest, but they didn't tell me that. And then I started to recover pretty quickly. I felt really good, almost immediately. 4 days later, I went home and began the recovery with this new realization being that I'm not invincible, that I'm not going to live forever, that I almost died, right? That I, with 3 young kids and an amazing wife, almost left them, without me. So that was a really intense experience. And I think for me, I would love to share some of the realizations that I've come to from that. And I wish it didn't require a heart attack for that to happen. because I think the blessings I've received as a result of that happening to me have been amazing. Like I really feel like on so many levels I've been reborn and given a second chance. And I'd love for everybody, especially those of us, kind of in midlife where you start taking things for granted or you're hustling so hard you don't have time to maintain the right balance with yourself and with your family and the other elements of your life. Uh, you shouldn't need a kick in the ass for that stuff to kick in, but sometimes you do. And so one of my missions for the rest of my life now is to share this story and hopefully inspire people to be aware of some of the things that can be risks for this, but also you know see some of the beauty of the changes that I've made and how those could may potentially help others without them having to have a heart attack to realize that. So that's something I definitely want to look at. So I started recovery from that point, and I went from being a guy who I thought I was fit, and I think I thought I was fit because I was exercising a lot and I was riding mountain bikes and I would do crazy endurance events. But the reality was I wasn't fit at all. If I'm very honest with myself, I had probably gotten 30 to 40 pounds overweight, and that had become my new normal. And I wasn't physically fit. I would put strain and stress on my body and gut through hard physical endeavors, but that's really unhealthy. And I didn't realize that at the time. I had also, again, I was 40. My kids are in the early stages of elementary school at that time. I was having sort of a renaissance period socially where you start meeting all these new families and friends through social circles through the elementary school. And I found that we were going out and partying a lot. In fact, I can't even, when I look back, I'm surprised at, how many Sundays and even Mondays I kind of felt like crap because we had drank too much over the weekend socially with, our kids, parents, friends, and these new circles of friends. And so, my lifestyle, I think we were pushing it really hard socially and definitely drinking too much and then making poor, food decisions in the wake of drinking too much. I would stress my body by putting it through extreme exertion, but not having a fundamental like foundation of conditioning there. I think I took on a lot of stress from work and I didn't have a counterbalance of mindfulness and meditation and just introspection to balance that out. Because stress isn't a bad thing. I don't want to Actually, stress can be a really great thing. It's all about balance. And I think that's one of the biggest things I've taken away is balance. And so that'll be actually one of the follow-up sessions we talk about here because I've developed even some formulas around balance, a way to um, sort of scorecard yourself on like, where are you at risk of losing balance? Because it's impossible to keep all the plates spinning all the time in this modern world. You just got to be self-aware and know when you're too far out of whack on any one area. So that's something we'll delve into more. But long story short, I started my recovery, and over the following 2 years from that, um, I dropped 40 pounds. I feel like I got much more physically fit fundamentally. My relationships improved. I have started reaching out to old friends and rekindling relationships that are really important to me. As we've talked about in core values, I really did some soul searching to figure out what are the things that matter to me the most and using those to drive decisions in my life. So there's a number of these things that I think come up as themes that I want to share my story about. So nutrition is one, fitness is another one, mindfulness is super core, and constant growth and spirituality and just connection with friends and family and loved ones. These are all things that I think I have put center stage. They weren't all center stage prior to my heart attack, and that's a shame. And again, I think my closing comment here is I wish I didn't require this massive oh shit moment to reframe what's important. And my goal is just to share my story and maybe inspire a few of you out there. If you're complacent on any of these things, which I'm not saying you are, but if you are, it's a great opportunity to self-assess and maybe double down on a couple of these things without needing a no shit moment of your own. So thank you for listening. This is a super personal story I've never shared other than sort of one-on-one. So I'm kind of opening myself up here. But I think sharing the story can only do good. And look forward to a couple follow-up podcast episodes to deep dive into some of those things, some of the areas that have become core tenets in how I can live a more healthy, positive, connected, and mindful life. Thank you so much for listening. I'd love any feedback you have, so feel free to send it my way. And look forward to next week. I'll probably start with mindfulness. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, so that was wow, that was podcast 4 on GrowthSwag. And now I get Adam's vision a little bit more about what he's doing in his podcast. And I took some notes, and it's much different this time because it's not so much a recipe of, what to do in the business environment or with team dynamics and things like that. So he said he was looking for some feedback from us guys out here watching this, or I'm listening to this, and just directly off the top, I got to tell you that there has been many times in my career where I have slept under the desk at work to finish projects or worked crazy hours, like around the clock with offshore teams and our team to meet goals, insane goals. There's times I've not eaten healthy. I mean, I personally, since Adam shared, I'm going to share, I've been sober 5 months and and not a drop of alcohol, and been really focused on mental acuity and a whole lot of positive things around, just being successful, primarily in business and in your career. So I'll just drop straight to the bottom here, where he says at the end of it, at the end of podcast 4 here, his oh shit moment about his heart attack, that he really opened up and he shared something that he's normally shared one on one with people, but now he's actually printed it into digital and he's shared it with people. And again, I gotta give a lot of credit to the bravery it takes to sometimes share stuff from your heart, because I've put my own videos out about the dog rescue that I set up, or the shoes that we gave to kids at orphanages, and just the tear-jerking moments that when you think when you're going to go into something, you don't know what it really ends up being until you feel it. So the bravery that it takes to be able to share such a story, like a real story, is compelling, well received, appreciative. It really just ties into self-care. And, some of that I couldn't, he started, Adam, you started free flowing there with nutrition, growth, connection, fitness, uh, rekindling old relationships in your past that mattered, near death experience. You had a reboot, basically. You dropped the weight, you got healthy. These are like recipes we all know, but man, the way you tell your story uh, is just, I could see it in my head. So thank you for the share. And man, the 1 out of 5 chance that you survived with the Widowmaker, they put the stint in your heart there. I mean, that is unbelievable. And being a mountain biker, can attest to the fact of an unhealthy lifestyle, but yet you go to extremes. And one time I did a 50-mile bike ride through Big Bear, and it took us all day, like 12, 13 hours. And there were moments where I laid down on the ground and was like so hyper exhausted that I just like I don't know what I was sweating out at that point. But I mean, points I've pushed my body to extremes, and for I don't know for what reason, but it's true. I'm over 40 now, and self-care is, thank you for this share. And so since this is going to be a series that Adam is putting out, I'm real excited to learn about probably his next topic will be mindfulness, because I'll be honest, being a male, it hasn't been natural for me to want to meditate or to do self-healing, or, burn nice smelling candles or take a nice hot bath and just calm down and de-stress. Like I've grown up being taught to tough it out and just work hard and persevere through. So I think that this topics that you're sharing are right on time and definitely appreciated. And you have the points in there where like the aspirin thins your blood during your heart attack to really, made it so you could, that you didn't die, and probably, right? So life is finite. Mountain biking is good. Um, Health and fitness, mindfulness, connection, stress is a good thing, but with balance. And you even have formulas for that. So that's going to be really cool. So I'm going to close out my review of Adam Massey's GrowthSwag podcast. And I will say, Adam, in my last video, I said maybe you should go to YouTube and at least put an equalizer and a photo of yourself and just get the encoding up there because of the audience. It doesn't have to be a live feed. I still think that that's probably good. There's there's something about the way you told your true story there that resonated with me mentally. That whereas if I was watching you, live tell this, that would be also compelling. But I just think it's just a different medium. So I don't know. Maybe do both. Maybe video yourself live, but then also encode just the audio for the podcast listeners of the very same, you know, um, cast. So thank you for this, and look forward to more. Like I said, I've got friends who've messaged me and said, "Wow, I'm listening to Adam's, you know, story." And a good friend of mine who I hired at my ISP named Mario, while he was working for us, he actually got cancer and he had to get a kidney transplant from his brother. And like, he is one of the most grounded. He's a technologist in his own right, a programmer, and a great guy and pretty funny too. But I mean, his journey with health has been something I've seen him always have to attend to. So, man, anyways, he appreciated your podcast too. So keep it up. 5 stars, 5 out of 5, bud. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to close out the stream. Take care, guys.